And we are in the wealthiest country on the globe. And Maryland, where we're based, is one of the wealthiest states within the wealthiest country on the globe. And yet, every single week, I see, bands of people who are seeking to get divorced and are really living on the edge.
Welcome to Divorce Diaries, where attorney Cary Jacobson brings you real stories, hard truths, and practical advice on navigating divorce and family law. Whether you're going through it, considering it, or just curious, this is your place for clarity, confidence, and resilience.
Welcome to Divorce Diaries, Lessons from the Trenches, where we share real stories and expert insights to help you navigate the divorce process with less stress and more clarity. I'm your host, Cary Jacobson, and today I'm thrilled to have my guest and friend, Gregory Gann. Greg is the president of Gann Partnership LLC. He is a Certified Divorce Financial Analyst, CDFA, and has been operating his own wealth management firm since 1989. He's also certified and active collaborative law practitioner as well as in mediation. And so he brings a unique combination of skills and experience to the divorce financial analyst world. Thank you so much, Greg, for being here today.
Thank you.
So, Greg, can you tell our listeners a little bit about what a certified divorce financial analyst does and how your financial background complements that role?
Sure. So what a certified divorce financial analyst does is he or she looks at the facts in a case, the financial implications in a case, and analyzes those, looks at ways to reach settlement, looks at tax implications, trade-offs, offsets, to come up with things that are equitable and help to expedite resolution and minimize court time and costs.
Absolutely. And I know that that is something that you spend a lot of your time doing. So tell us a little bit about how you in that role can assist a person who may be going through the divorce process.
Well, it's integral in what I do because to me, everything other than custody, everything about a divorce is financial.
Mm-hmm.
So having an understanding of if we take this asset versus that asset, what's the real growth value of it? Looking at alimony as an example. Well, if you get X amount of property and that property can bake for a number of years before you have to start taking distributions from it, maybe you don't need as much alimony. So it's integrated in every aspect of analyzing a situation to determine what is the best outcome for a client, whether I'm representing just one client or both as a neutral. It underscores everything we do.
Yeah. Is there a scenario where your financial planning comes into the divorce process? When you're helping a client through the divorce process and really like planning what post-divorce is going to look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have a background in traditional financial planning, but I refer all of that out to other folks today. I concentrate really on the divorce, but it's sort of like if you're a doctor, you've been ingrained in medical techniques and background. So understanding the full aspect of financial planning is I think part and parcel of who I am and what I bring to the table. But this divorce financial planning is a whole different animal from traditional financial or retirement planning. So it's important to, I think, have that understanding and that knowledge, but it really is a separate animal. And this is my real passion, my real calling is in the divorce side. And there aren't that many people who really specialize on the divorce side. So it really is more of a unique niche, if you will.
Right. And that was going to be my next question. When someone is kind of starting that divorce process, how do they find someone who does what you do and is not, the traditional, financial planner that most of us have heard of?
Well, the good news is that 15 years ago, no one even heard of what a certified divorce financial analyst was. Today, there's more awareness.
Right.
Today, people are looking for it. Today, people are looking for, like for you, Cary, mediators. They're looking for people of diverse backgrounds. And many, many, many people loathe the idea of having to go to court.
Absolutely.
And what I would say to people, I feel like I'm preaching the choir with you, Cary, is that when you go from spouse A and spouse B to plaintiff A and defendant B, it's really downhill. I mean, I've never been served a lawsuit. I've never been served papers. If the first suit I ever received was from a spouse, I mean, that would be very jolting. And so it's very hard to recover from that people do, but why not, if the core of divorce is a financial settlement, why not start with a financial proposal and analyze different financial proposals? And I'm not naive. I don't think everybody can settle, but at least try there and then go to court, as opposed to the way most people unfortunately approach it, is to go to court and then try to settle after all the money has been spent.
I 100% agree with you. And that's the way we try to guide our clients, that reach as many or as much of the settlement first before tensions get higher, because it is so much more complicated once the documents have been filed in court, because even though it's not as necessary any longer to make as many negative allegations in the pleadings, I think a lot of times that still happens, and it's very difficult to recover from, as that spouse. I often see the people who have been referred to us through court mediation, right? And I can't tell you how many times I've had scenarios where one of the first things that comes up is, well, they said this in their pleading, right? They said this about me in what they filed with the court. And it's really difficult emotionally to get past that in order for them to get to the point where they're willing and ready to have, substantive conversations about settlement.
Right. I mean, and this is the one person, these people selected in their lives. They didn't select their kids. They didn't select their parents. They selected a spouse. It's fine that it's not working, but how do you move forward in a healthy way? You just made me think of something that I see frequently, and I have a couple cases like this today, Cary, where it really starts as a divorce. There are minor children, and all of a sudden, the issues of the minor children, there's a lot of tension between the parents, and all of a sudden, it becomes a custody battle as well as a divorce battle, and spouse A will say, I want to get retribution, and I want accountability for what he or she has done. And I say, here's the problem. There's no accountability. You're not going to go too far. And I said, look, let's get you divorced. It's how you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. If there are custody issues and divorce issues, let's get you divorced. And then you're not going to have to deal with this person in the same light. And then let's address the children's issues. Because once you're divorced, you're divorced. But issues around children can always be reopened. And, if you try to tackle too much at one time versus bifurcating those issues, I think you're much better to segregate them and resolve one thing at a time and have freedom from this individual, and then only address the kids' issues.
Yeah. The only hesitation I have from that, from a legal perspective, is you have to deal with the custody issues, at least in part, have an agreement on the custody issues
Yes.
before the divorce can be finalized. And so often what I see people do is, kind of resign themselves to, this is what it's going to look like, right? And this is all the best that I can do, instead of going further and pushing the custody issues. And it's so much more challenging to modify later. So, it's a different standard, and it's more challenging to modify later. What I hope happens in many scenarios is, if they can resolve the financial issues, oftentimes the communication between the parents becomes more effective, and they can kind of put the financial issues to the side and deal more effectively with the co-parenting.
Yeah. There are just some of those cases that I'm sure you see too, where that it's going to be, until these kids are 18, there's going to be a battle.
Yeah.
And it'll never end. And if one parent says he's drinking, and, you can do a, testing or whatever, but there's no guarantee, and nothing is foolproof. And until there's really a problem, unfortunately, our law is reactionary rather than proactive.
Absolutely.
And that's just a problem for all parents when, there's a bad actor.
Yeah. In your experience, what would you say one common mistake you've seen people make during their divorce process that could have been prevented, and how can our listeners avoid that?
Well, I think there's so many, probably examples, so it's hard to come up with one. But I think sometimes people become so exhausted that they throw in the towel, and this is going to have a permanent impact on them. Right. So what I always say is take this off of your shoulders, put this onto our shoulders. Let your divorce be our problem. Remove yourself as much as possible. But if you're surrendering to things that are not fair for you, because you just have been worn out and dragged down, mm-hmm. It's going to impact you. And you may think that someone's going to help you, and you're going to be able to move forward, and you're going to be able to be bailed out. But I've seen so many times where it doesn't happen that way. So know when to stop. That's another thing. It's tied to that. Know when to be satisfied and grateful for the terms that you reached after going all back and forth and a lot of analysis. But if you're not at that point where you're satisfied, don't cash in.
Yeah, I think that is something that we see often. It's really a difficult balancing point, right? Of making sure your interests are protected, but not necessarily going overboard, and continuing to push for more. But I agree with you that sometimes people do give in too early just to be done, right? Because they want to move on to the next chapter, but they really aren't looking 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road on how they're going to be financially, well off, and are they going to be able to make it when they could have otherwise been okay.
And I guess a corollary to that, though, is one of the first things I learned in law school, and it comes up every single week, was you can have a right, but not necessarily a remedy.
Right. And
let's say you're entitled to something, but you have a violent spouse, and you're worried about your health, and maybe even your life. Mm-hmm. at some point you've got to look at, I think, that whole big picture and
Absolutely.
say, what is it worth? What, how far do you want to push? How far do you want to proceed? Can you live with this? So I think it's just important to look at all, not just finances, but certainly finances, but the whole big picture
Absolutely.
and the personalities involved.
Right. Yeah. And that's something that we stress to our clients, that we can give them the information of what they are legally entitled to, but we're never going to tell them what they should necessarily pursue, because what's right for them may not be right for the next client, right? Everybody puts a different value on those intangibles that we're not living the day-to-day experiencing. And so really, it's as long as we're informing our clients so that they can make those informed decisions, that's all that we can really ask for. And I think sometimes, unfortunately, attorneys often push their clients, to go further when it's A, not beneficial in the long run, and B, will ultimately be to their detriment.
At Jacobson Family Law, we specialize in keeping the drama out of divorce. Our experienced team offers mediation and collaborative divorce services tailored to your unique situation. Take control of your future. Schedule an appointment today at jacobsonfamilylaw.com.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the party's divorce, not the lawyer's divorce.
Right.
And many times lawyers forget whose divorce it really is, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I know that we kind of discussed this prior to the episode starting. So a little bit more about those scenarios where you are working with an individual or a couple who may have, limited financial means. It's not that they don't have a job and, some resources, but they really are struggling to make it past paycheck to paycheck. What do you do in those scenarios, and how can you, really help them address those issues?
Well, it really is quite sobering, because we are in the everything bubble, as we speak in January 2025. And it's been a big bubble for many, many, many years. I mean, real estate is all-time high. Stock market's all-time high. Bond market, gold, Bitcoin. I mean, everything is flying on all cylinders. And yet, we are in the wealthiest country on the globe. And Maryland, where we're based, is one of the wealthiest states within the wealthiest country on the globe. And yet, every single week, I see, bands of people who are seeking to get divorced and are really living on the edge.
Yeah.
Some of them only have money in an IRA or 401k, which they really don't want to touch.
Right.
And others have even had to tap that.
Mm-hmm.
I see people where one side is being supported with fees by a family member, where the other does not have that same resource. Mm-hmm. I've had cases where I, defer my fee until after their settlement, because there's not going to be any cash. There's no money to help them in the divorce. And they say, I really want your assistance. I don't have the cash until the property sells, or until I receive my share of, the investment or equity in a house or whatever it might be. So that to me is a huge issue. And, look, people are very thrifty when they buy a car. I mean, they know it to the red penny what they're getting when they know what restaurants charge what and what groceries, but when it comes to their divorce, they're not great shoppers. They're not great consumers, because That's the word I was looking for, because they just take blindly what, is promoted to them. And oftentimes it's not just that it doesn't help the outcome. Oftentimes when you're pushing and fighting and dealing with court, it actually makes it a lot worse, and the parties end up with less, not more.
Right.
So I just find it really interesting that not only are we the everything bubble, but we're in one of the wealthiest states in the entire country. I mean, we border, DC,
Right.
which is considered recession proof or whatever. And I have to tell you, I'm in the DC market all the time, and people are struggling.
Yeah.
And it's very hard when if they're struggling in one household and now they've got to stretch those dollars to two. And you put $50,000 to $100,000 in legal fees into that, they just don't have it. It's not,
Yeah.
And unfortunately, again, oftentimes one side has family resources that will pay for that. They wouldn't buy them a car, but they'll spend $40,000 to pay for a lawyer. It's to me kind of strange.
Yeah, and especially when there are alternatives, such as your services, where you can be a neutral and a mediator between the parties to help them resolve those things. Our services that do the same thing, or even representing one party and trying to negotiate those terms outside of court, where they could save tens of thousands of dollars.
Yes.
And all of the stress related to the court process, when ultimately so often they end up resolving, right before trial anyway.
Yeah. Well, and if they have limited means, Cary.
Yeah.
Okay. How much is there to fight over?
Right.
And if the legal fees, I see this so often, the amount of money in controversy between the two parties is less than the legal fees.
Right.
There's something wrong with that picture, right?
Yep. I see it all the time as well. What strategies do you recommend for individuals to rebuild after divorce to secure their financial future?
Budget. I mean, nothing, I don't have any, miracle or, magic wand. It's living within their means. I find oftentimes people talk about repurchasing a home as opposed to renting. I don't think that, and they think that they're throwing money down the drain by renting.
Yep.
I think when you're in a transition period, renting might be just perfect and just fine. I also think that because we're in the everything bubble and because interest rates have been suppressed for so long, real estate values might not appreciate. They actually might even depreciate. So this notion of I've got to build equity, well, quite frankly, over the next 5-6 years, there may not be any equity. Right. So, but I can't, it's a challenge because if a household is having difficulty saving while there's one roof, it's that much more challenging when there are two. And the only thing I can say is, they got to think about where they spend their money, and they got to think about how they spend on their divorce. Because, if you take, to your point, if you take 10, 20, 30, 40, whatever, $1,000 out of retirement savings or out of kids' educational funds, it's very, very difficult to rebuild that. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's gone forever, because even if you recoup the $10, $20, $30,000, you lose the earnings and the growth on that money.
Yeah.
So, they just have to be wise consumers and look at the big picture.
Yeah. Well, kind of as I wrap up, how, can you tell our listeners how they can learn more about you and the services that you provide?
Sure. So I have a website, Gann Mediation and Litigation Support. Fortunately, I have, like you, Cary, stellar 5-star reviews. They can look up Certified Divorce Financial Analyst. And I do complimentary consultations. I always say to people, about 35% of the folks we meet are not candidates for what we do, but I try to make sure, every single person I have dealt with over the last, 15 plus years, every single person has told us that they gain knowledge and wisdom that help them and that they haven't gotten elsewhere. At least if I can help them, that makes me happy. And then we engage with people who there is a fit. And I at least help the people who, even if there is not a fit, to move forward.
Right.
Because my passion is in changing the way America divorces. That's my calling.
I 100% agree. And just to let listeners know that, oftentimes you and I have teamed up over the years in scenarios where you will handle the negotiation for the parties on the financial side of things, especially when we're dealing with those complex financial situations, assets, restricted stock units, compensation, those really complex situations, businesses, those types of things. And then on the flip side, they come to us and we deal with, ensuring that those terms of their agreement are included in their marital settlement agreement and address any of the custody related issues that they may have, and then ultimately help them with the final divorce proceeding. And I find that has really been a great model for the clients that we have worked on together.
We really have embodied the collaborative approach.
Yeah.
Because you handle the marital settlement agreement and the legal side, and I'm doing the financial and the negotiation, and we each stick to our area of expertise and our knitting. And the other thing is that the client gets two heads in question instead of one. So it really works out quite well, and we can set our fee on basically a limited scope to what we each specialize.
And so for any of our listeners that might be a good fit, let us know and we would be happy to assist you in that process. Well, thanks again, Greg, for joining us on this episode of Divorce Diaries. Thanks for sharing your expertise. And for those of you listening, remember that navigating divorce is not just about ending a chapter. It's about starting a new one on solid financial footing. If you found today's discussion helpful, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with someone who might benefit. Until next time, take care and keep moving forward.
Thanks for joining us today on this episode of Divorce Diaries. Remember, every journey is unique, but you don't have to navigate it alone. Visit jacobsonfamilylaw.com or call 443-726-4912 for support and guidance. Are you considering divorce, or are you in the early stages of the process? Attend our free online divorce workshop. Gain insights into the legal and financial aspects of divorce, discover valuable resources, and learn from experienced professionals. Take the next step towards clarity and empowerment. Register now for our next live workshop at jacobsonworkshop.com.